your name?
My name is Newstead, Martin Newstead.
You live here in Traverse City?
I do, and it's always been my hometown ever since I was a kid.
Are you Irish?
No, I ain't. My mother was half Irish and half Scotch, and my father was a full-blooded Englishman. That's the three dirty mixtures on the world. Yeah.
And how old are you, Mr. Newstead?
Well, sir, I'll be 66 years old the 3rd day of October.
Worked in the lumber camp a lot?
Oh, I put in a few days, had a few meals there and went off.
You were one of the people that knew Paul Bunyan's death.
Oh, yes, yeah. I was with Paul when he put in the pictured rocks up in the Upper Peninsula and dug the hole for Lake Superior. Yeah, I was with him the time when we run out of timber. He had to go west, and we started farming there. We had nothing else to do. And we cleared off a big chunk of ground, and Paul went out west to look up some more timber. And when he come back, the potatoes was all ready to dig, nice, great big tops, and the ground was covered. Paul went out, he thought he'd see how the potatoes were coming out, and he dug a hole in the side of one hill, and 40 bushel of potatoes rolled out before he could plug the hole. There's a little Irishman down below, he says, "Beat James," he says, "I'll pay them all for supper." Oh, God, that did tickle me when that little son of a bitch jumped on the floor. He says, "That's the truth." He says, "I can prove it for I peeled the potatoes."
A lot of people wondered where Paul Bunyan was born, but he was born in Maine. When he was 3 weeks old, he was such a lummox of a kid that he wallowed around so much in his sleep that he rolled down 4 square miles standing timber. Well, the natives wouldn't stand for that, so they built him a floating cradle and anchored it out at Eastport, Maine. Every time he rocked in that cradle, it caused a 75-foot tide in the Bay of Fundy, and it destroyed several villages and lost lots of lives. And when he got asleep, they couldn't wake him, however, so they called the British Navy out and they fired broadside for 7 hours. When they did awake him, he was excited over so much excitement that he tumbled overboard into the ocean. And he raised the water so it sunk 7 more ships. So the Navy wouldn't stand for that, so they captured his cradle. And out of the cradle they made 7 more ships, but the tide in the Bay of Fundy is a-going yet. Well, well, you ready for it? Well, his dad was a great fellow about clearing land. He'd take the trees out as they come to him. So he'd hit the big pulley up in the tree and the rope, and he'd go to digging, and he'd pull the tree over. Finally, this one, the oxen, at the Yoga oxen, they started to go just about the time he hooked it, and he didn't have time to get down out of the tree. So they started hauling. They hauled that tree, and they hadn't been chopping any around it, and they pulled it clear over, almost to the ground. And the rope broke, and the tree flipped back, and it flipped Paul Bunyan clear up here on the Manistee River. What did he do when he got here? Well, he went to lumber, and finally he got him a big ox. His ox was a monster, the biggest ox there was in the world. He was 7 max handles wide between the eyes. And he didn't stop to build skidways and like that. He'd just hitch on a quarter section of land, haul it up the river and sift the logs out of it and put them into the river and hitch old Babe, the big blue ox, on the rubbish and haul it back where he come from. Well, he heard tell of a big cow down in Vermont that mated that ox for size. The ox being 6 handles wide between the eyes, the cow was recommended to be equally as large. So he got in touch with them down there, and he made a deal for the cow. So he's lumbering up here on the Manistee. So we took the big ox that morning, and we started for Vermont. Got down there that day and took the big ox with him to help him along. He stayed that night, and next day he brought the cow back, and they landed back in Manistee. Well, she'd have proved to have been a great ragged milker, but he turned her out on evergreens, that's nuts, evergreen boughs and balsam boughs. The milk got so strong they couldn't use it on the table. All it was good for.
Did you ever know anybody that was at all like Paul Bunyan?
What?
Did you ever know anybody like Paul Bunyan?
Oh, no, not just like him. No, it's not. That's just a story I made up, you know, about Paul Bunyan. That's just a story. Everything is made up like that. Know the fellow that they used to call, a fellow by the name of old Jim Vahe. He used to lumber himself. He was lumberman a little bit. That is his jobber. He'd take jobs. He was a great fellow to spur out and do such work, something like Paul Bunyan, taking on and this and that, and tell you about this thing and that thing and how to do all these things and everything. He said he was the first man that rode the Hoochie Toochie River on 2 bales of cotton while the Indians was the goddamn thing he couldn't get ashore his, you know, shit and all such things as that. And oh, I don't know, tell you about what he had done and worked on around the river and all these things like that, and tell you big shots of things and what he could do and how he carried 500 pounds a shot right over the new pavement. They put it in there. Took 500 pounds in each hand of buckshot and took it in a sack, and he walked across that new pavement and he sunk clear into his knees and all such things like that, you know. They ain't nothing to that. What, you know, that's the story about what they get up about Paul Bunyan or Jim Vahe.
Well, the funny thing, I never heard him tell any Paul Bunyan stories about women. You know what Paul Bunyan could do with a woman?
No, I never did. I don't know anything about that. I never heard him say anything like that. Did you ever hear anything actually? I never did that, no. Told him how that he went to work in this prairie owl, and he says he'll get right up and just tell you, you'll think it's just so. That he said, he said, I used to work for Paul quite a good bit, he used to get up and say. See, I used to work for Paul. He says, and one time he says, Paul got a big tract of timber, and he went up and looked this here tract over, and they built the camp, but they went around and seen a big stream of water there and didn't go around. Well, he bought this here timber, and the reason why that this here timber stayed in there is because it was such a long ways them days to get out to a stream. Well, Paul, he didn't look around to see where he was buying, and he bought this timber quite cheap at that time. He said that they went up there and made a mess of camps and everything, and they worked there all winter and put in, hired his crew and started to dry. Well, finally, when they started what?
You say they started driving?
No, they started and worked there all winter and put in those roadways and everything to this river. Good banking place. They went up and soon cleared off a good banking place there, and they worked there with a big, maybe 125 men all winter, and put in had lots of teams and everything, brought them that river, and put in all this work in there all winter. And when they come to break the roadways in the spring, well, they broke the roadways and kept breaking the roadways and had some of the men keeping the logs going a little bit. And when they got the roadways all broke, well, then they started the drive to go, you see, to drive these logs out. Well, he started to drive those logs out. They drove 2 weeks. And finally they came right straight back with the jammers, or the head fellas running the head logs. They drove 2 weeks, and they run onto some camps that looked, the head fellas did run on some camps there that looked like where they worked all winter, these boys, you see. And Paul did too. And they said, well, Paul, here's some camps that didn't get out when the camps built them pretty close to the river, you see, you don't see them. Then camps resembled our camps, your camps, yes. Well, then they go 2 weeks more. Started again, right around, they come right back to that same place again. There was these camps again. Well, then they got out and discovered and found out that, hell, they'd been driving there for 4 weeks with 70, 80, 100 men on that drive, paying them good wages and working like that. And Perry said he was one of the fellows working there. Drove there 4 weeks. Well, Paul said, well, now we're in an awful fix. He said, we will investigate this. So they went around and around, and they couldn't find no inlet nor outlet of that lake. It was a lake. Instead of a river, it was a lake. Well, then he didn't know what in the world to do. He worked there all winter, spent about all he had, and he didn't know what in the world to do. And so he had that winter, that awful cold winter, where he had that blue ox. And that blue ox was one of the stoutest animals that ever was hitched up. So he looked all over. He went out to look and see if he could. He discovered then, they went to look to see if he could get an outlet, or from this here. Well, there's a pretty close to a half mile of a canal to dig if he got it out to a let to this place, to where then he'd get to a river, he could put his logs through. If he gets that outlet let, well, then he could drive his logs through there and take them to the mills. So finally he heard of a big cow, one of the biggest, about the biggest cow in the world, put there. He went and got her, give $150 for this cow. And they took her up, and this cow was giving milk, and I don't know, they had some kind of feed to feed her, and darn it, made the medicine, or the milk taste something like medicine, and everything like that. The kind of hay and stuff that he's giving it, and got that something out of the hay, and he eating it, made the milk taste like medicine. Well, and I'd cut that out, but finally they worked this here, and his men, his crew went, and he took them, and they plowed it and scraped this right out. Broke it right out there, some of the frost in the ground, but they just got that right out there in no time at all. When they got it through, then they drove their logs through and went out on to the river, and then it was all right. So they had to do that to save he lost all he had, you see. Well, this place was an awful place for stones, and they dulled their axes. In them days, they didn't have no grindstones, and the axes all got dull, hitting them on stones. Well, coming right to this place, it was just where they come to this river, where they go down, it's awful hilly, and damn it, they get up on there, and they wanted to grind their axes, and they didn't know what in the world to do. And Paul says, well, I'll tell you, boys, it's awful stony here, and you get these here, get your axes, hold them right on here now. You have to run a little bit, hold them right on, let these here stones roll and follow them right up, and keep your axes on these stones, and grind them sharp, chop. So they done that, and my God, it set the river on fire. And the fellow down below there, he was going to kill some hogs at that time, and he had 100 hogs down there. And damn it, the river, he didn't have to boil his water. He put them right in the river, soaked them right there, and he scalded all his hogs. That's what Pray's hobby is, or something like that. Gets off as stuff as that. I can't tell it's good as Pray, because he's alive on that kind of stuff.
Finally, he got a supply of the cough medicine liniment. So he thought he'd going to make him butter. And he had no storehouse. That big cow making about a ton of butter a day, piled it up right out near the camp. And the boys wondered what he's going to do with so much of that butter piled up outdoors there. But there's no use asking them any questions. They wouldn't get no decided answer. But they just kept piling that butter. Finally, the ice and snow went off, and he used that butter for to grease his logging road, and it enabled him to run his logging sleighs all summer.
Well, how cold is it used to get it?
Well, this one particular winter, you ready for more of it? We were lumbering up here on Manistee, 68 degrees below zero and each degree of 16 inches long, froze all the blazes and Paul's lanterns. We couldn't blow them out, so we broke them off and threw them outdoors. And in the spring, when it thawed up, they set the whole north of Michigan afire and burnt St. Mary's River in two. So we was up again it. We had our logs in the river. So we wanted to save our logs. So we had to contrive a plan to connect them two ends together. So we went at it. We used a matchbox for a connection, connected the two ends together, and got our logs out. But that matchbox is still there, and most people think it's St. Mary's locks.
Well, how did you happen to get acquainted with Paul?
Well, the way I come to happen to get acquainted with him, we was had me to watch camp there. And happened that summer, and he happened to be around there. And in the watching camp, there was a side hill there, and he wanted me to do my leisure time to plant some potatoes on that side hill. So we got kind of figuring out how best to plant them. I supposed to plant them along lengthways the hill, and he's supposed to plant them up and down. So we went at it. I thought it wouldn't dictate him. And we planted them potatoes up and down that hill. It was quite steep. Well, I wondered what his idea was, but anyway, I watched him, and every time he planted a row, I noticed he made quite a little bank down to the foot of the hill. And we kept planting them, finally got them planted, and worked them and hoed them. And when it come digging time, you know, I noticed we went down there, and first thing we dug that little bank of dirt away from the end of the road. We dug the bank away from the end of the road and held a bag over the end of the road and caught the potatoes when they come rolling down the hill. We was getting out a pile of logs one winter on around the river. And we cut our logs and we banked them on the river. And in the spring, when the ice and snow went off, we started a spring drive of logs. Well, we drove those logs downstream for a couple of weeks. When we come to a set of camps that looked just like old Paul's camps. So we drove for a couple of weeks more, and we come to a set, looked just like old Paul's. So we started the third week. We began to think there might be something wrong. So when 2 weeks it up, we come to the set of camps again, and we went ashore. And sure enough, it was old Paul's camps. And there we'd been driving those logs right around and around the river all that time. Never knowed no difference. It didn't know that river didn't have no beginning, no end. Just rode in a circle. So we was up against it. We had to save our logs. So we hitched up old Babe, big blue ox on the breaking pole, and we pulled the fire over from Round River into Manistee, floated the logs down the river, down the furrow into Manistee, and saved our logs. That was the winter, cold winter, that we had such a big crew. The cooks couldn't keep the salt and pepper shakers full. They was all fagged out from running back and forth trying to keep the shakers full. And you know how a lumberjack likes salt for his beans. Well, Paul and me got the idea hitching a team of iron grays on the salt and pepper wagon. So I drove that team on the salt and pepper wagon up and down the table in the cook shack all the rest of that winter except Sundays. Sundays we'd have prunes for breakfast, and it'd take me all day to haul the prune pits out. I guess we've got enough of it.